Okay, now in this section, we're in the final portion of introducing ourselves to web development, the basics of it. We've covered HTML and its purpose, which is nothing more than predefined tags that are controlled by the W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium, and they are used to wrap around content to make them display a certain way. Well, we've gone over a few basic tags. There's more, and again, we'll be using tools to do this with, so we won't need to know them all, and we'll learn them as we go. And we'll start developing things with tools. But now at least we know what HTML is and what it does. Then we took a look at CSS, how it's implemented into web pages, the syntax of it, and how it controls things either through class identification, through actual tag names such as body, or div even. Any tag element that actually has a true name through the specification of HTML can be looked upon in a CSS style sheet, such as the one that we created, as its element name. So we can identify things by their element name, which means that all body tags or all anchor tags or all div tags, if we had them in here, would be controlled by that. We also talked about setting up a class in CSS as well. As well as IDs. So we can identify elements. The point there is that we can identify elements either by something we create or by its actual name. And of course, if we go by its name, it's a little more rigid. That means that all tags of that element name will get the effects we apply. Maybe something we don't want to have happen, so we create a class to give us some custom behaviors. So now what we need to do is take a look at JavaScript. We took a look at CSS and HTML. We understand their rules. JavaScript allows us to do things on the web page to apply functionality. Some active things going on. So we're going to talk about words like event handlers or events, things that the user does inside of our web page, clicking on things, making selections in forms. These are all events. And events drive things to happen. We can call functions, or what are called methods or functions, pieces of code that do things. So we can write functions in our JavaScript that are called by events or things that take place within the document to make those things happen. So we set up little blocks of code that do work for us, and then we call them within the event handler. And an event handler would be something like in an anchor tag, an anchor is meant to be clicked. When a user clicks the link text, it goes to another page. For example, let's pull the page open. This is the page we were just looking at the code for. If I click the link, it takes me to secondpage.html. So me clicking on that link is making something happen. Well, on that click, I may want something to occur. I may want to set up some code to do some kind of behavior, if you will. And that's the first piece we're going to look at, because we're going to use that on-click event handler in our major example of using JavaScript both as writing blocks of code, what we call blocks inside of a script tag. We'll set up a function real quick first, and then we're going to take a look at inline JavaScript, JavaScript that actually is written out in a line within an HTML attribute, which is kind of cool. So we can embed this stuff together and make it look slick. The point is so that you recognize the code and what you're looking at. For example, if I do an on-click event handler here, I can say on-click equals and a quote. Get some space out here like this and put my closing quote down. Inside the on-click event handler, I can tell it to call something or do something. I can put some kind of function here. Or I can put some kind of code here. There's some kind of JavaScript code right in here. So as you move forward, when you see things like an on-click attribute inside of a tag, you know that that's an event. And pretty much what that's going to be calling is some kind of JavaScript, some kind of function, something predefined that we wrote or that's already inside of the JavaScript document object model. And we'll talk about the document object model as we move forward. The document, well, briefly, it's called the DOM, D-O-M. You may have seen the acronym for it, or may not. But the document object model is the object model of our web page. It is the document object. This whole document is an object. You'll see the keyword document, and then you're going to see me use a dot and then something like get elements by ID or get element by name. Those are predefined methods or functions within the JavaScript document object model that I can call upon. So there are predefined methods, but I can create my own too and write them and put them in. So you'll see things like a script tag with a source equals something.js file up here, such as jQuery and things like that. Those are files pretty much like the .css file we have, except they have JavaScript in them. And they get loaded into the page and held in memory, and then we can call those functions from our page code down below. But without boring you with too much talk about it, let's go ahead and do it. Let's go ahead and show it happening. Let me get this function, or this event handler off of that tag real quick. and get down to business. I'm going to go up into the head element here. The first thing we're going to do is create a function in JavaScript, and then we're going to call that function from the event handler. Then we're going to move forward and start dealing with things with some inline JavaScript and do some really neat stuff with some div tags and those ID attributes that we're looking at here. And hopefully I can make some sense of that for you. You can practice it and try it out and make it look really slick. But the first one's going to be a really simple alert box. Whenever the user clicks on the link, we want that to actually bust out an alert box that says howdy or something like that. And then when they click OK, it just continues on to the next page. So let's take a look here. Let's go ahead and create a script tag. We're going to open up a script tag. And we'll go ahead and close that script tag. And this is the HTML tag that tells the browser, hey, what's inside of here is script language. And generally, I would actually say what the language is in the tag, define language equals JavaScript or something like that. But at the basic level, and you'll see that when we get into dealing with the tools and stuff, we'll see longer versions of these tags, which you're looking for the name of the tag, that angle bracket, and the name. What happens after that? Well, those are attributes that are added up, to apply to the tag. We use the keyword function in JavaScript, and it is lowercase. And the function, I give it a name, such as show message. And I'm just going to write show as MSG here. I'm creating this function myself, so what I write here is totally up to me. But functions have parameters that we can pass to them. And so I'm going to drop in a parameter called MSG, and then I'm going to open up my function with curly braces like this. Kind of looks like CSS, doesn't it? But don't be confused, it's not CSS. And so what I'd like it to do is whenever the user clicks on a link down here to show the alert box, but only if there's a message being passed up into the function. Okay, so let's do it first without a parameter coming in. So we'll just leave it empty for now. And when this function's called, I'm going to call the alert, which is a key word in JavaScript. It calls the alert box, and I want it to say howdy, like this. And that's all I want it to do. And when it gets done with that, I want it to return back to whatever called it. And so these semicolons go at the end of these lines here. No semicolon here. Because of the fact that it's an open curly brace, this encompasses my function's behavior right here. And so it just calls an alert, which is a standard thing in JavaScript. And as we move forward through later courses in web development, you'll get more of a hang of the JavaScript syntax. I want to define its purpose right now and kind of give you an idea of what it looks like. That's the main purpose of these tutorials here in the beginning, is introducing us to these languages. So no need to really memorize the syntax so much as just recognize we have things like functions, and there's some code syntax that creates them. And then we have things we can do inside the functions, which have keywords we'll need to be familiar with within JavaScript. And then there's a process to it. But the thing is that this is script. That's a piece of JavaScript. So down here I can say onClick equals, and inside those quotes I can say show message. And it is case sensitive. And I do need to really apply that and put a little semicolon there for that. So now whenever we click on this, the show message dialog should be called. So I'm going to go ahead and save this real quick. Pull open a browser. And now bear in mind, you may get a warning at the top of your page, a little cream box if you're using IE or some other browser says, hey, a script has been disabled. Just go ahead and click on it and enable the script. And we're working locally, and it's saying, hey, you open something up here locally that's not coming from a site. Some security is going to come into play because we're running scripting. But if I click this link, we see that the howdy box pops up. Click OK, and it carries me on because we returned control to whatever called it with that return keyword. So that's pretty slick. So if we take a look at the code, that's nice. Well, what if I want to actually have different links call the show message dialog box, but each link has its own thing? Like, for example, this one is going to go to the second page.html. But on second page.html, the other file that we work with here, I might want it to say going back to home page as an alert. Just something to make this more dynamic so that our function is multi-usable, which is really the purpose of writing it, so that I can accept arguments up in here. So here's the challenge. I want to create an on-click event handler for both links, both the one that takes us to the second page and the one that takes us back to the home page. So I'm going to come in here and go ahead and just do a quick paste to put that in. And so now I've got the show message. So I'm going to need the function on both pages, aren't I? Well, that's not a big deal, is it? We'll just go like this. We'll go back to the other page and we'll grab the function. I know you know where I'm going somewhere with this, right? We don't want to have to deal with this, do we? We'd like it to be in one central location, like perhaps a file. that I can work with? Yes, we're going to go to a source file here in a moment that looks something like this one does for this JavaScript. We're going to create a .js file and put it in a scripts folder. You guessed it if you thought that's where I was going. So that's basically the setup for this right now. So now we have the show message called on the second page.html, and we'll go ahead and save that. And we also have it on the home page.html. We'll save that. And let's go back and do a quick test drive here. Let's go back to our home page. And notice it didn't do anything there because that page was already loaded. Now it gives me this one. We go to the next one. If I click this one, it does it again. But now I want to be able to change that text to say going back to home page or going to second page for this one. And so that's what we're going to look at here in the next section.